Welcome to the Strategy with Jason podcast. Tune in for everything you need to know to stay in the know regarding the automotive industry. Here's your host, Jason Harris.
Hey, what's going on, Podcast Nation? It is Jason Harris here, and thank you for joining me on another episode of Strategy with Jason. Today, I have a very special episode. I've been looking forward to doing this all week, actually since last week, because we had to reschedule it because my internet went out. But I have Jennifer Okoeguale with me, and I have Emiliano Boyd, both of them with Accelerate Auto, and we have some very cool topics that need to be talked about. So I'm super excited to have you guys here. Thank you so much for taking the time to jam with me today.
Thanks for having us, Jason.
Yeah, thanks for having us. Excited to be here with you.
This is going to be fun. Actually, this is going to be a lot of fun. There's some really cool topics we want to cover today. But before we kind of get into our subjects, I always kind of like to start off our podcast with a little origin story, because I'm always super curious to find out how people get started in this crazy industry we call automotive. So, Emiliano, I'll start off with you. And then, Jen, I'll ask you the same question. How do you get started in this crazy little world we call the automotive industry?
I think I got in automotive the only reason that's valid to get into automotive. I was chasing a girl at the time. So she was great. She was a huge part of my life for a long time. And she ended up getting a job over here at dealer.com in Vermont, Burlington, and thought it would be a great fit for me to come in and take a look at. At the time, I was just working a retail sales job or just a regular sales job. Mm-hmm. And I didn't really have anywhere to go. We were looking for next steps, and Vermont was where we ended up settling, calling home for a while. And then that got me in the door at Cox Automotive, and the rest is pretty much history.
That is cool. I find, people usually kind of come in one of three ways. Either they're born into it, or they stumble their way into it, or they're like me, they get conned into it. But Jen, I'd actually like to hear how you got into this. How did you get started in the industry?
Yeah, sure. I mean, based on those three that you just listed, I certainly fall into the second category. I'm absolutely one of those people that kind of fell into the industry by accident. I never grew up dreaming about being in automotive. I didn't intend to pursue a career in automotive. I always knew I wanted to work in PR and communications. That was always my intention. I just had no idea it was going to lead me into this space. And I was working a contract gig out of school. This was just over 5 years ago. And I was there for a while, and I really wanted a little more stability. So I started looking for work elsewhere. And I saw this opportunity at Toyota, and the job description looked perfect. It was a perfect marriage of my skills and my interests, but I wasn't sure about automotive. Like, I didn't know what the heck was going on under the hood of a car. I wasn't a nuts and bolts kind of person. My perception of auto was so off base. But anyway, I took a chance. I went to the job interview. And obviously here I am today. So I never looked back. I luckily got the job. And, I have to say, I ask a lot of people this question, like, how did you get started in the industry? And a lot of people I ask say the same thing. They kind of just fell into it. Mm-hmm. But I will say all of those people are still here today. So it really just goes to show, like, even if you didn't intend to be in auto, you get into the industry and you don't turn back. So it's obviously a great space to be. So I'm category number 2.
You're category number 2. But it is true, though, like automotive industry is one of those things that when it kind of gets under your skin or into your blood, it is super hard to get out, it out. I thought I was out at one point in time, and then I got sucked back in. Never mind, it's a bad movie pun. Anyways, today, guys, we came together from a mutual friend of ours, Todd Phillips, which I'm so glad that he was able to connect with us, because I really am really passionate about what you guys are doing over at Accelerate Auto. And let's start off our podcast there. And Emiliano, I'll ask you this, and Jen, I'll get your opinion too. What is Accelerate Auto, and why was it created?
Yeah, great question. So Accelerate Auto it's a non-for-profit that's been established by Black professionals and allies across all sectors of automotive that are really looking to seek to increase Black representation, career advancement opportunities, and community engagement, all within specifically the Black community. Ultimately, we are here as the most comprehensive representation of the Black experience across Canadian automotive, and our goal is to really help amplify the voice of Black people across automotive, period.
Mm-hmm. Jen, is there anything that you'd want to kind of add to that?
Yeah, I mean, I would just say that Accelerate Auto, it kind of represents an opportunity, an opportunity to do better, a step in the right direction, right? One of many steps that need to be taken. I would say, society at large on a global scale is kind of facing this defining moment. as it relates to diversity and conversations around race. And, automotive is really no exception to the rule. We're certainly an industry that needs to change. I mean, at the very least, just take a look at the makeup of the workforce across auto.
Yep.
Specifically senior management, upper rank, C-suite executive, and then look at the communities where we're operating, the communities where we're selling cars. Look at the people who are buying our cars. And do senior management roles and leaders across the industry reflect that? And the answer is no. So that kind of signals to me that there's action that needs to happen in order to make a change, to be a little more representative and reflective. And so I would say that's kind of where Accelerate Auto is stepping in to really be a resource and a guiding light and a North Star for our industry to lean on, to start to take that step in the right direction and to do better.
And I love that, because it is an opportunity. It's one thing for us to identify that, hey, there's not a balance here, and there's definitely an opportunity in having diversity. And many companies that have it it's just something that we have to do. It's just long overdue. I guess that's what I'm trying to say. Now, you guys have put together an amazing team of people, all right, to push or I guess generate conversations and action around what our industry needs to do to move forward. So I guess that'd be kind of my next question is how does Accelerate Auto, support and continue growth and diversity within the automotive space? Emiliano, I'll ask you, and then Jen, I'll get your thoughts too.
Yeah, and just to kind of wrap up on the previous question, right? Mm-hmm. The point of the work needing to happen in this space, we've identified, 3,200, 3,300 franchise dealership across the country. We're yet to find one that's Black owned, right? So there's certainly, to Jennifer's point, it begs the question, right? Like, why are we in a space that provides such diverse opportunities, but seems to marginalize, ownership opportunities or decision-making opportunities, especially at the executive level, considerably more one way and considerably less the other? So again, it's just time, and certainly it's the right thing to do, but also there's direct profitability in diversity, right? Like, we know that companies that offer more diverse perspective also outperform those that do not. 100%. So if it's for the right reasons, or to be perfectly honest with you, if it's for the wrong reasons and it's just about the dollars, it really doesn't matter, right? This is a decision that's the right thing to do, and it is something that is profitable for organizations. We're hard pressed to see how that's not something that it would make sense for organizations to pick up and support across the board. So in terms of what it is that we're doing now, one of the hugest components about the work that we're looking to do is to really educate and bring additional awareness to the subject matter, to the industry as a whole. The way that we take a look at it, it's really hard to have a solution for a problem that you're not educated about. And it's really hard for you to be educated about a problem that you're not aware of. So certainly for us, a huge component of the work that we're looking to do is to use opportunities like this to really speak from elevated platforms where we get to have conversations with a diverse population and really get an opportunity to kind of have a megaphone amplify our message. If we can get people aware about the problem and certainly the solutions that we're bringing to the table, and more importantly, if we can get people to care enough to get involved, we feel like that starts to certainly help us move in the right direction. So we're having conversations actively and very much so across the board. We're doing a ton of community involvement with speaking engagements at the high school level. We're working with various associations in order to just continue to, again, get this message out. We're growing a Black community of automotive professionals directly on our LinkedIn page as well. So it's certainly a great place to showcase not only our efforts, but also to rally people to a centralized place for like-minded individuals to come together to start to work towards a solution. We certainly have some more tangible goals that we're working towards. Increasing representation, and Jennifer alluded to it. Certainly there's a focus for us in the lens of the work that we're doing to make sure that we not only bring more Black people to the door of automotive, but once we bring them to the door, that we provide a structure and initiatives that help support, accelerate their skill development, and mentor them into these opportunities for them to find, executive level positions, ownership level positions, things of that nature. One of the largest parts of the work that we're going to be looking to do is launching in just a few weeks. We're actually getting ready to send the invites for our large spread consultation phase, where we'll be inviting like-minded organizations, allies, educational institutions, skills trainers, literally everybody and anybody that we can get our hands on, to present these initiatives that we have that we'd like to suggest across the automotive segment. And we'd also want to make sure, and it's critical for us to have this representation and the voice of the industry to be heard in the way that we're approaching the work, because we want to make sure that it's viable initiatives for the industry to take on, that it takes into consideration the unique natures of all the verticals that support the automotive space. So if you're looking at dealerships, it's not going to be the same approach as what needs to happen in the manufacturer space or the supplier associations, media, all across the board. So we certainly want to make sure that in the the efforts and the initiatives that we put together, that we are building these solutions from within the industry with input from the industry to make sure we have viable initiatives, sustainable initiatives, scalable initiatives, and most importantly, some actionable progress.
See, I love how in depth. See, it's one thing to kind of talk from the outside in. No, that's not the approach here at all. The how is very much so of building from within the industry and then continuing to support, which I think is amazing. Emilio, you crushed it on the how Accelerate Auto can is supporting the industry. Jen, is there anything that you'd like to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, just really quickly because Emiliano covered it. But I would just say, as we step forward and move down this path, there's kind of three problem areas that we've identified. We know that there's a lot that you can do that needs to be done under the broader diversity umbrella, and especially as it relates to anti-Black and systemic racism in order to make positive impact. But, we have to be realistic with ourselves. And so what we've done is really identified three problem areas that we as an organization are going to attack and tackle within automotive. And the first one is financial barriers to education. So that's really just thinking about, students, youth. How do we increase the interest in automotive at the student level? And Emiliano spoke to some of the student engagement events that we've already started to see momentum with. So outside of just building awareness of the opportunities for students, it's also looking for those opportunities to connect them with funding opportunities, whether that's scholarships or bursaries, in order to get more students into education paths that will lead them into auto.
That's cool.
The second one is the lack of Black representation. So looking at current state, what does our industry look like, and how can we help improve the representation of Black people across all levels, across all verticals within automotive? And then the third one is awareness, right? So just bringing awareness not only to the opportunities within the industry, but also awareness to anti-Black and systemic racism as a whole, especially for leaders across the industry. So those are kind of the three gap areas that we're really trying to focus on and crystallize our programs around. But obviously underpinning all of that is partnership, right? We know we can't do this alone. Yep. And we're already having a lot of meaningful conversations and engagements with potential partners and stakeholders and leaders across the industry. I mean, the support that we've received so far has been really overwhelming, which really just further demonstrates the need for our work and the willingness to learn and listen on behalf of the rest of the industry. But we're looking forward to rolling out programming related to those three problem areas. But the first step is really this consultation phase, which we're launching, where we'll kind of battle test some of these initiatives with our partners across the industry. And there's one more thing to mention, because you said it yourself, Jason. We have a fantastic team. It's not only two of us. There's a group of about 11 of us on our board as part of our founding members. We find ourselves to really be the most comprehensive representation of the Black experience in the Canadian automotive industry.
Absolutely.
So really the purpose of that and that approach is to make sure that we're negating any kind of blind spots that we might have. I mean, automotive is vast. There's so many, it's not just automotive brands, right? There's vast sectors and various verticals across the industry, whether it's the aftermarket, dealerships, OEMs, suppliers, the media. We're really trying to make sure that we have member representation covering all facets of the industry, so that when we start to roll out these programs and initiatives, that they're being developed in a way that best fits the need and the unique needs of the industry and various parts of it.
Well, and I think that's the really cool part of what you guys are doing, is that willingness to really partner. And that keyword, just really partner. I mean, right now we have a lot of dealerships, a lot of managers right now that are listening or watching to this podcast right now. And they've been in the business industry for a long time. They've been trained on how to sell cars and service cars. They've been developed how to manage teams. Diversity is honestly, in the 18 years I spent in the car business, is not, I gotta be honest, maybe less. Look, I hate to say it, all right, but it's probably come up in a meeting probably fewer times than the fingers on my hand, to be completely honest with you, right? So it's having that conversation. But I think to even start that conversation for a lot of the managers and owners out there that may be listening to the podcast right now is, just talking about the benefits of having a diverse team. I mean, Emiliano, you kind of mentioned it earlier, like, of course there's the benefits of like, it's just the bottom line, it's the right thing to do, but then there's also the profitability. There's just having an open conversation about that. How would you guys kind of recommend that, management teams and dealerships out there start having these conversations on the benefits and why they need to have a diverse team? Emiliano, I'll start with you, and then Jen, I'll get your thoughts too.
Yeah, great question. I think first and foremost, creating and fostering through leadership and through action the kind of culture that makes it okay for people to start to have these conversations.
Yeah.
If people, and especially if Black employees of your dealership or your organization aren't sure whether or not this is the kind of place where those conversations are encouraged, certainly they're not going to be the first one to put their hand up as the stark minority in the room to be like, hey, what about me?
Exactly.
Like, is anybody thinking about what's going on my side of the fence? So certainly I think, and one of the most critical components of the work that we've been able to do across our organizations has been leadership buy-in right from the get-go. It's certainly important for people with lived experience to be able to bring the passion to the table in order to help shape and drive these initiatives. But ultimately, you operate within a system, within a dealership, within an organization where leadership is centralized. And if you do not have leadership support for this to become a priority for your dealership, to your point, Jason, if people are having this conversation 5 times over 18 years, it's going to be real hard for that conversation to start to change, and certainly for it to be what it is right now, how socially charged it is and politically charged it is to be talking about stuff like race in the workplace and what we're doing for equitable opportunities. So I would say across the board, in the places where we've seen the greatest success, there has been immediate buy-in from leadership to not only draw the line, identify themselves as being like, hey, we know that there's a problem in our industry, in our organization, in our dealership, whatever it may be, and we're tired of just being part of the issue. We're going to proactively start to be part of the solution. And that really starts with a vocal message, a soul of support and solidarity and outreach to your Black employees, whatever it may be. It starts from the top. Certainly, I think by empowering your people to bring their full selves to work, you would be really surprised and impressed by the passion that people have for this kind of stuff. And a really interesting byproduct of creating more equitable workplaces, even if it's just for Black people where you start, is that becomes part of the culture that is ingrained within your organization and within your dealership. So if we know that we are now working in a place that is considering how to make equal space and equal opportunity for everybody that brings their own unique identity and unique experience to the table, that cascades and permeates across anybody else that feels similarly. So you start to really foster this culture of equitable workplaces and equitable practices that certainly propagates across your industry, your organization as a whole. So I would say leadership buy-in right from the top. And there's a ton of great content out in the internet that's completely free. Educate yourself. Get smarter about what we're talking about, right? Like I said before, it's really hard to tackle a problem that you're not educated on. It's really hard to be educated about a subject that you're not even talking about. So get aware, listen to these podcasts, reach out to people within your community. There's great organizing work that happens all over the place. But the next step from conversation has to be tangible action. Get educated about how to approach the subject matter so that you can start to put in fundamental and structural processes that are slightly different from what you do today that will create a considerably different output. None of the work that we're looking to do is to tear down operating models that allow businesses that have been successful for so long to now just make it a completely different process and structure to support. All it is certain tweaks, minor adjustments across the entirety of your operating structure that will produce a fundamentally different output. And that has to start at the top, and it has to start with creating safe spaces for people to be comfortable having these conversations so they can start to put the pieces together as to how to put real solutions, tangible action to the table for your dealership, for your organization, for whatever it may be.
See, I love that. See, look, culture is like the holy grail of every single dealership's goal and objective out there. Like it's something that they're always striving for. All right. But to understand, culture is to have diversity, and to maintain diversity requires process. Yeah. See, we can have these conversations and they can be good ideas, but it can literally stop right there. It can just straight up stop like, that was a good idea, to the next thing. If we're not intentional with our processes, it don't go anywhere. I love that, Emiliano. Thank you. Jen, I know you got some great thoughts on this too, on just, how that conversation starts so that we can really talk about the benefits of having a diverse team and how it positively affects, not only our culture, but our operations.
Yeah. And, I think you guys both said it, right? It has to do with tangible action. And I think sometimes that's what's lacking. I think a lot of leaders these days, they have positive intent, but we know how busy our day-to-day gets, right? Like we have a whole laundry list of items to get to, and there's competing priorities. So when diversity gets added onto that, when it becomes, the last item on a long list already of things to do tends to fall to the wayside. So I think, that actionable steps and that tangible steps is really key here. But first and foremost, like you said, Jason, it starts with a conversation, right? And it doesn't even have to be a conversation across your whole organization, but as leaders, just stop and have the conversation with yourself. So ask yourself the tough questions. As a leader in your business, do you advocate for equity within your management team? Do you advocate for equity within your broader workforce and company and organization and culture? When you're having meetings with your management and you're making discussions on things like talent, are you looking at things and making those decisions from a diversity lens or an equity lens? Do you have equal pay within your organization? Because the wage gap is a really big issue.
Sure.
We talk about it a lot with gender, but it's also a very big issue with race, even more so. If you see discrimination, and remember, discrimination is not always overt forms of racism. It can also be present itself in the form of microaggressions, which is something that a lot of people of color face. So when you see that, do you actively work to confront it? And do you ensure that it doesn't exist within your organization? Something else that's really big right now that we talk about a lot is this idea about mentorship and sponsorship to help prepare people for leadership roles. If you have Black talent in your company, do you actively work to ensure that they're being properly mentored or sponsored? If you look at your recruitment collateral and material, is it representative? There's a lot of questions, and that's just a first step, but a lot of questions that you can have that lead to conversations, as you said, that then lead to actions, even simple actions that make really big impact right away. So, at the very least, have these conversations, ask yourself these questions. And again, like you said, I know it's uncomfortable. Race is an uncomfortable topic, or at least it can be, but it doesn't have to be. Just starts with speaking about it, right? And being open with it and making sure that people on your team are open to speak about it. And, I'll say that today, race is being talked about in places and in ways that it never has been before, specifically in the workforce, in the workplace, around the boardroom table in meetings. And it's getting higher and higher on our long list of to-dos in HR teams and management committees. So just make sure that it's a priority, because I think if you want to make a change, it has to be a priority, right? You can't say that you want to improve something and then not actually work towards improving it. You have to have measurable and trackable goals, like you mentioned, Jason, because it's a complex problem, and complex problems really do require complex solutions. But that's why you really have to attack this problem head on, strategically, and with strategically thought out solutions and intentional strategies, like you said as well. But also making sure that it's measurable. I mean, our business knows numbers. We run on numbers, right? We run on a cycle. You can attach that same thinking and that same innovation to diversity and the race conversation. And lastly, I'll just say that our industry has such a bright future. Like, it's such a great space to be in. And I really do think that our future growth, our industry sustainability, our financial well-being is going to be tied to diversity in a way, because I think that the composition of our workforce today is going to impact the decisions that are being made today that are going to have an impact on society at large for years to come, right? So you need to make sure that you have appropriate representation at the table where those decisions are being made, because the people who you're impacting have to be represented and have to have a voice. And then the last thing I'll just speak to, which Emiliano said perfectly, is just the importance of having leadership buy-in. Like, culture trickles down from the top. Associates and employees and team members, they're not going to feel like their voice is heard, or they're not going to feel comfortable raising their voice if they don't feel like they're being supported at the high level. So, as a leader, make sure that this is something that you support and that you're vocal about supporting.
And it is about fostering a place that is safe to have these conversations. This morning, I was talking to a friend of mine who's he's a director of operations for a relatively large automotive group, and we were just kind of casually talking about our day. And I was telling him about this podcast that I was doing later today, and he was like, "Oh, that's super cool." And then, of course, I had to ask the question: Is this a conversation that you guys have had at that group level? And if so, how did the conversation come about? And you know what he told me? He said, "You know what? This is a conversation I've wanted to have for probably the last 10 years. And I said, okay. Now, granted, I know this person well, so I can be pretty blunt with them and just flat out ask the question. So why haven't you had it? Got to be honest with you, I'm just not comfortable. And look, not that there was not the wrong answer or right answer, but there is this level of we're uncomfortable using the word Black. And, and especially when we're talking about we have to have leadership buy-in, that means that our leaders need to be in a place, or we need to create a place that's safe enough or comfortable enough that they can have conversations and around these topics. So I guess kind of my questions for you guys is, why are we so uncomfortable using the word Black? And how can dealerships all sizes, no matter from large groups to individual single points, create kind of, I mean, it comes from the top down, but create that kind of that area where it's like, hey, we can have this conversation. It can be an open conversation. I'll start with you, Emiliano, and then Jen, I'll get your thoughts too.
It's tough for Jen because I get to just steamroll it.
Should I get Jen's thoughts first this time, and then come back to you?
Yeah, Jen, you want to go? You go.
All right, Jen, let's get your thoughts first.
Yeah, sure. I mean, there's a reason why it's uncomfortable, right? I mean, it's not I just mentioned it. Race is being talked about in places that it traditionally hasn't been. And then the other thing I'll say is, like I mentioned before, if you look at the composition of the leaders across our industry, they're not Black. And if you don't have that lived experience, you don't know what to say, or if you're going to say something that's going to, maybe speak out of turn, or, no one wants to put themselves in a compromising position. And I understand that. And then the other thing I'll say is,
real quick, Jen, why do you think we feel like that puts us in a compromising position? I'm just curious. Your thoughts?
Well, yeah. I mean, what I was just going to say is, let's not beat around the bush. I mean, the reason why race has been put into such sharp focus over the last year is because of these tragic events that have been broadcast to the world on a mass scale, right? Starting with the murder of George Floyd, and it's turned into this political movement. And, a lot of leaders, they don't want to put themselves in that political space because they're worried that they might say something that will offend someone, whether they're offending, people who are not of color or offending people who are of color. It's this awkward world and conversation that we have to start navigating. But the problem is, the longer we're hands off, the longer it's going to take us to start actually working towards improving the issues that relate and cause the issues in the first place.
Yeah.
So, I can't say I blame people for staying quiet, but the problem with staying quiet is it's almost as bad as working against it, right? Being quiet is just complacency. I'll say there's really no room for complacency. When it comes to the race conversation. I mean, and especially as leaders, leaders have a role, and we're starting to see it. Leaders have a role to play, and a lot more of them, especially across corporate Canada, corporate North America, are a lot more compelled to act, right? And if you don't act, you're just going to be left behind, and your business is going to suffer for it. So, if we mentioned before, whether you're doing it because it's the right thing to do or because there's the business case to be made for it, you just got to do it.
That's very true. It is. You just have to do it. Emiliano, now your chance to kind of add to that.
I would say I think there's a natural fear with subject matter that you're uncomfortable with, right? I think the root of this is lack of comfort and familiarity with the subject. Also, I think there's a real fear about the cancel culture that we currently live in. One misstep, one misspoken word, and that can be the end, and it moves, especially with social media. That's how fast things move today. I would say, there's been a huge back and forth on terminology. Is it Black? Is it African American? African Canadian American? What are we calling people today? I would say the same way that we have to approach this conversation is the same way we've had to approach every conversation where we weren't the expert on the subject matter. We have to be willing to put ourselves in uncomfortable positions. We have to be willing to put ourselves out there and be comfortable failing in the effort of trying to push this entire thing forward in the right direction.
Exactly.
So certainly to Jennifer's point, I don't hold anything against anybody that sits on the fence. To be perfectly honest with you, 2 years ago, I was sitting square on the fence. If it didn't affect me in any kind of direct or if it didn't affect me or anybody I cared about directly, it wasn't really on my radar. Certainly, I have taken it upon myself to educate myself about the subject matter, and I feel a sense of responsibility to come forward and make myself a differentiator with Jennifer, with the members of Accelerated Auto, with people that feel like the window of opportunity that has been presented to us in the light of all of the focused attention on the plight that Black people face as a global community, that certainly is a golden opportunity for us to get uncomfortable, for us to be brave enough to take a step forward, to potentially be wrong about our approach, but to be pure in our intentions. And I think to that capacity, we need leaders that have been comfortable leading their entire lives and their entire organizations, their dealerships. They are people of respect, of good repute in their communities. They are people that people listen to. We need all of these people to find their courage in one form or another. And you don't have to be super vocal about your efforts, but you owe it to yourself, you owe it to your family, you owe it to your community to be a good steward of the community. And I think that includes increasing representation, being vocal about doing the right thing, taking a step forward. Often people find that courage is contagious. The impact that your leadership, that your vocal effort, that your step forward, that your little piece of work on self-education happens with that cause as a ripple effect is considerably greater than you will know if you never undertake that first step. And we certainly lived it firsthand in the work that we're doing with Accelerate Auto, and we can see it start to galvanize the automotive industry as a whole. People that have been sitting on the fence, great leaders, people with great hearts that have been looking for a way to move the needle from a significant matter on this subject, are now starting to find their courage because we as a community, we as a group of working professionals have stepped forward and we have put ourselves out there and say, hey, no more, it's time for change. And if you feel the same way, then get on board with us. Let's make it happen. So I certainly, like I said, I don't condemn anybody, but certainly if we don't do everything that we can to take advantage of this unique opportunity that's been presented to us, shame on us.
No, you know what? I'm 100% with you on that. I'm listening to you talk, and what kind of keeps kind of going through my head is a conversation that I actually had with my operations manager a few weeks ago, actually when we were supposed to record this the first time. But then my internet went down. And something he said, and he didn't do it on purpose. It was just like, well, do you know what you want to talk about during that podcast? I said, well, yeah, I got a few topics. He goes, well, just make sure you don't say anything stupid. And I thought to myself, I'm like, you know what? I've done 400 podcasts, and this is the only time you've ever come out to tell me, make sure I don't say anything stupid. and I thought about that because it just, you know what? The one thing I've seen in leaders, and I've met a lot of leaders, and you guys are leaders, and you've met a tremendous amount of leaders, is the willingness to fail. And it's just like the acceptance, like, you know what, I'm going to go into something knowing that I will probably stumble over myself a couple times, but I'm still going to do it. And I'll get to the finish line. And I'm looking out there as, you know, the leaders that I work with on a regular basis is that having these conversations really comes from that leader, and that willingness to just say, hey, look, we're going to have this conversation, and I may say some stupid things, not intentionally. All right. But I might fail. I might fail the first 3 times we figure this thing out. All right. But you know what? We've set the goal. I'm going to accept the failures, and we're going to go ahead and move forward. I feel like an industry that's kind of like, that's what we have to do. You know, my next question kind of for you guys is that after this conversation's happened, okay, I'm going to kind of play out this scenario. The groups had the conversation, or the dealerships had this conversation. And now it kind of comes to, how do we do it? Right. And we mentioned it a little earlier when we were talking about process. All right. If you're going to be more inclusive within your operations, you have to process that. I would love to get your guys' thoughts on what you feel like maybe a few of those first initial processes need to be kind of put in place, you know, at the dealer group level or at the dealership level to ensure there is a inclusive, diverse group within our operations. Emiliano, I'll start with you, and then Jen, I'll ask you the same question.
Yeah, I think that's a really good question. And to your point, I think people with all of the best intentions in the world, if they don't feel comfortable enough to put that intent into action, they're going to end up stuck one way or the other. So 100%. I think there's some really easy, quick wins that dealerships, organizations, people across the board that manage people at all can take a look at. Number one, talk to your people, right? Make a phone call. Talk to your Black employees. Be like, hey, I know there's a lot of like wild stuff going on right now. Can we just take a minute to figure out if there's anything we could be doing to better accommodate you and all of the stuff that you lived through that we never knew of? It was never a point of emphasis, was never on our radar. Now we know it's everywhere. Are we doing everything that we can as an organization to support the people that we invest in? That's an easy conversation. It requires no dollars whatsoever. And immediately, by the feedback that you will be getting from the people that you are talking to that have this lived experience, your opinion on the subject will begin to change. It is unbelievable the kind of pressure and constant stress that Black people and marginalized people across the board are constantly under. And I feel like one of the core responsibilities of leadership is to manage your people. Make sure that the place that they come and spend most of the time in their lives every day is a place where they can bring their full selves to work. Besides that, I think easy things like take a look at your website. Right? If there's not a single Black person in any of the web pages you got, in the About Us page, and in any of the visuals that you're using to represent your dealership, there's probably a real easy fix for that. Same thing for your marketing collateral. How are you presenting your dealership? Is it an accurate representation of the community that you serve? I think those are super easy, super straightforward, low-hanging fruit opportunities for people to put together. There's certainly some more like tangible things, or I think some more advanced things that you could do. Start to build out resource groups, right? Talk to people, get people organized. Hey, this is something that we want to have dedicated focus and attention to. Make it an action item on your agenda. When you're meeting with your leadership team, have that conversation. You're surrounded by great thought leaders. You're telling me there's nobody in the room that has any ideas about how they can start to make their workplace a more inclusive and welcoming place? I don't think that's the case, right? So I think there's some super low-hanging fruit that can be done. And certainly with some of the programming that we're doing, we're looking to bring considerably more structure to it as well. So some things that are more tangible. But ultimately for us, we want to make the lift and the ask that we put on the industry as easy as possible. We'll do the work. You just got to say yes to being on board and part of it. So I think there's some, those three things are things that you can do that cost you absolutely no money to your dealership, to your organization, or anything like that. Have a conversation, talk to your people, actually care. Number two, take a look at your website. Make sure it's an accurate representation of the customer base that you serve. Number three, if you want to start to organize your people, be surprised by the passion that people carry to do the right thing. One person putting their hands up immediately starts a domino effect around the room, around the organization. We're seeing it. We're living it right now. Again, those are things that cost you no dollars that you can bring to the table today that will fundamentally start to change the culture, which is a huge word we keep going back to, culture, culture, culture. Those are things today that you can start to do that will fundamentally shift your culture and start to create a more equitable, more inclusive work culture for all of your employees.
I love that. And it really is. Like we all talk about how that is the holy grail of all of our businesses is our culture. And man, those are some great actionables. Jen, I know you have a few thoughts and a couple actionables that dealerships can also utilize to ensure that they have an inclusive, diverse team as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think Emiliano really covered a lot of it, but the first thing he said really hits home for me, and that's just to talk to your people, right? Check in. There's been a lot going on in the last year, specifically in the Black community. So check in with your people and make sure that they're okay, first and foremost. And then beyond that, give them a voice. Show them that you're supporting them. Show them that you support this initiative, that you want to make a change. Because as Emiliano said, there might be people who want to raise their hands, but they don't feel comfortable doing that. And all it takes is one person to speak up that then starts this ripple effect across your organization, which would then impact your culture and lead to different ideas being brought forward. And then eventually at some point it becomes this grassroots initiative where yes, it's being supported at the leadership level, but you have a galvanization of your employees and your team members that are working towards striving for a change in ways that mean something to them. I think that's certainly number one. But outside of all of the, other low-hanging fruit, immediate things that you can do right now, and just to be clear, everything Emiliano just covered, you can go and do that tomorrow. You can do that today after listening to this podcast. Pick up the phone, book an online meeting, like just start the conversation, and that takes zero resources outside of just a time and willingness to do so. But we talked earlier about these measurable, trackable goals that you really need to attach, right? So think about what kind of goals you have for your store or your organization or your business, because that might look a little bit different to everyone. So do you think that you don't have a lot of Black representation in your management? And if that's the case, what are you going to do, or what goals are you going to attach and KPIs to ensure that, in 1 year from now, you do have better representation? Maybe it has to do with the fact that you don't just have a lot of Black people applying to your dealership because for some reason they're just not interested in working there. Well, there's probably a reason for that. Is it because of the community that you operate in? If your community is really diverse, then maybe it's because of the recruitment efforts that you're putting out into the market. Maybe it's because of the ways that you're reaching certain communities. Maybe you're not actively and intentionally trying to reach Black people. So again, just think about the goals that you have and then attach KPIs to it, because that really is the only way that you're going to hold yourself accountable to actually putting in processes that are going to allow you to achieve those goals. So, low hanging fruit for sure, but longer term and more sustainably, think about what those goals are and attach actual KPIs to them, and KPIs that will help you get there. Because otherwise, like I said before, it's always going to fall to the bottom of that to-do list and nothing's ever going to get done, right? And that's not what we're here for. And then obviously, maybe you want to make a change, but you just don't have the time or you don't know where to start. Talk to us. Like, we as Accelerate Auto are here because we want to be a resource for the industry to lean on. We want to partner with the industry to do this and go down this road together. So reach out to us because we're absolutely here to be a resource for you. We have programs, we have initiatives that we're planning to roll out into the industry, and they're really being rolled out to benefit people in the auto industry, right? So if you're not sure where to start, Accelerate Auto is a great first step, I will say. But again, those immediate low-hanging fruit, start doing that. Start having the conversation. Speak with your management teams. Make sure that it's known that it's on your priority list. Attach the KPIs, think about what your goals are, and set out a strategic plan. And then, of course, think about what resources exist around you because they're out there. Whether it's Accelerate Auto or the tons of educational resources that exist online, just start learning, start engaging outside of the four walls of your business.
I love making it known, right? It's because once everybody knows, there's this level of accountability for you to execute, right? What's the best way to ensure that you execute on your goals or your KPIs is you let people know. And then there's this kind of this shared accountability to ensure that you do that. Jen, I'm so with you. Look, the process is only as good as how well we can actually measure it. If we gone as far as creating some of the amazing processes Emiliano talked earlier, but then we don't measure the effectiveness of our efforts, then they just slowly start to kind of die off and they just don't happen anymore, right? To sum up, this entire podcast, for me and kind of my head when I was thinking here is like, I got sold a bill of goods that the automotive industry is a people business. And I think it's really time to make it an actual people business. It's no longer enough that we say that, right? That this needs to be a diverse, inclusive people business, and it starts from the leadership and it works its way down. This has been a great conversation. And I'm hopefully we can do another one of these because I just feel like there's so many great topics we touched on. There has to be a part 2 to this. But before I let you guys go though, for everybody out there that's watching, listening, and just really enjoying the conversation we had, and they want to take it to that next step, and they want to kind of continue this conversation. All right, what is the best way to connect with you? Jen, I'll ask you.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, reach out to us on our website, www.accelerateauto.ca. It's a great resource, but we're also really working on building our LinkedIn community. So connect with us on LinkedIn. And reach out to myself or Emiliano, right? Like we are open. So connect with us on LinkedIn. We're here to have the conversation. But right now, those are the 2 best platforms to get a hold of us.
We know Emiliano likes to talk. So Emiliano, can we reach out to you? Can we have these conversations?
Not hard to find. 438-340-9818. Holla at your boy.
See, there you go. See, that's what I love about you, man. Is just like, look, just remove all the roadblocks. Let's have the conversation. Let's get this done. Look, this has been a lot of fun today. I really appreciate your guys' time and having these conversations. You guys have yourself an amazing day. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Jason.
Thanks for having us, Jason.
Thanks for tuning in to the Strategy with Jason podcast with your host, Jason Harris. Don't want to miss new content? Be sure to check out the full podcast library at strategywithjason.com to stay in the know. Remember to like, comment, and subscribe.